As humans, we all know that one day we are born, and one day we will die. Everything that happened in the past and will happen in future is unknown to us, yet we find ourselves constantly worrying about what will eventually happen. Many people tend to follow certain religions, philosophies, and other concepts to create our own morality or meaning in life. But can we know if our present thoughts, actions, and emotions have any significance at all? It is uncertainties of pasts and futures collectively that have allowed the question, what is the meaning of life, to ravage humanity ever since we have become sentient beings. And as unsettling as it may sound, we have never been able to objectively answer these sorts of existential questions that plague our lives. Although many of us tend to latch onto many different ideologies to find comfort and coping mechanisms, and at least subdue some of the overwhelming anxiety life likes to throw at us, in many different religions, a deity or divine being created the entire universe and placed us all inside it. How we live day to day on this earth will eventually be used to determine how we will spend eternity after life, whether it be in heaven or hell. For others, the love and emotions we share with friends, family, and ourselves can be seen as a life of meaning. And for many, they believe that the meaning of life is of life and living itself. But for nihilists, the most common perception is denying that there is any inherent meaning in life at all. Nihilism, a theory promoting the state of believing in nothing, or of having no allegiances and no purposes. For many of us, we have faced nihilistic thoughts throughout or at some point in our lives. The heavy-hitting feeling of purposelessness, such as our entire lives not equating to any sort of meaning, feelings of no intrinsic value and ultimate importance. We all have our own set of values. Typically, we start life coinciding with our parents' beliefs and values. Eventually, we will grow older, and with that, new experiences and views of the world are unearthed, when we begin to question our old beliefs and find new ones to hold on to. Forming our own views on the world is usually down to a simple question we may ask, such as why? And that single three-letter word is a powerful one at that. We may start to feel like maybe our whole life hasn't been what we actually thought it was. It is with these thoughts that nihilists come to the conclusion that there is no why, no answers, simply there is nothing. As Leo Tolstoy, a Russian writer, once wrote, the only absolute knowledge attainable by man is that life is meaningless. The word nihilism comes from the Latin nihil, which translates to nothing, and ism, which translates to ideology, forming the ideology of nothingness. But nihilism isn't extremely helpful in a way of understanding it completely. Don't get it twisted with pessimism, which doesn't necessarily dictate one's ethical compass. It just makes it easier to assume that bad decisions will lead to negative consequences. People tend to confuse nihilism for pessimism, but they are very different from one another. By the dismissal of values and meaning altogether, nihilism rejects one's inherent or objective moral principles. And with pessimism, they tend to believe that in the end, evil will always overcome good. Nihilists, on the other hand, just simply do not believe in anything. There is no belief that there is good or bad in the world. This is what makes those two concepts different. Today, I asked my friend who is also into certain philosophies how he was doing. His answer was simple. He answered, "I am existing." This got me thinking on the interesting ideology of nihilism. Breaching the mind of a nihilist, the world simply exists, and due to humans' innate source of consciousness, we are able to create concepts to cling onto, such as Stoicism. But in realization, these concepts do not exist in reality. They are merely man-made ideas to create our own morality, meaning in life, and sensible ways to get through such problems that may arise. Picture a glass cup filled halfway with water. While optimists may view the glass as half full, pessimists will view the glass as half empty. For nihilists, they might say throw the entire glass away. Because what does it matter whether it's full or empty? Why should any of these mundane things carry meaning if we're going to all die anyway? Personally, instead, I would say drink as much as you want from the faucet. Wouldn't that be a more fulfilling stance on the matter? The act of being cynical is the belief that people only do things to help themselves, rather than for the good or sincere reasons. They have no faith in the human species and believe we are entirely selfish for our own benefits. On the other hand, cynics believe that good still exists out there, somewhere, but just not in humans. Whereas in the mind of the nihilist, there is no such thing as good or evil, because nothing exists. They are simply humanistic virtues and values that we have applied to such things. But how can nothing exist? Even this simple question arises a paradox, as how can we or anything exist if there truly is nothing? And if there is nothing, isn't that something? This uncovers the paradox of nihilism. If you believe in nothing, that nothing will become something that you believe in. Therefore, since you now believe in something, how can there be nihilism? Because nihilism is the belief that there is nothing. The earliest philosophical positions associated with what could be characterized as a nihilistic outlook are those of the skeptics. Nihilism, in fact, can be understood in several different ways and categories. The three main types of nihilism include political nihilism, which is the concept that the existing political, social, and religious order must be destroyed before any future progress can be made. We also have ethical nihilism, or moral nihilism, which denies the notion of absolute moral or ethical principles. Instead, good and evil are ambiguous, and beliefs that address them are the result of social and emotional influences. And we also have existential nihilism, which is the notion that life has no intrinsic meaning or value, and it is, no doubt, the most commonly used and understood sense of the word today, and is the type of nihilism we have mostly been talking about in this video. So, after explaining what nihilism is, one question was on my mind: why nihilism? Imagine in a slightly different world, equality was successfully achieved in its entirety, not just financially or politically. An equal world would mean all money in the world is meaningless because there is no use for it. It would mean that countries wouldn't exist because you can't be equal if there are territories to control and resources to protect. The human race would be a single race. How would we prioritize and organize our communities to decide what to focus on? There would be no leaders, only suggestions. No one to make the final call. Do we make more bread or build a starship? In the end, does it really matter? If you somehow find out, you might just be a simulation in a jar, or your thoughts were defined since the conception of this universe. What would you do? Fight the Matrix, or just let the Matrix run along? Maybe you are running along by fighting it. Maybe your values aren't really there. They just somehow happen, and the result is endorphins. Nothing actually happened when you did whatever you did in the name of equality. You might as well just have an injection of said hormones. Think of how far the human race has progressed in all paths of life. For example, the achievement of science, the exploration of space, the mass production of high tech, and the movement of human rights. We have come a long way, but what if it was all for nothing, a waste in the grand scheme of everything? Everything we go through in life, the highs and the lows, it's all been a wither in time, and in the end, it's really all for nothing. Among philosophers, Friedrich Nietzsche is most often associated with nihilism. For Nietzsche, there is no objective order or structure in the world except what we give it. Every belief, every consideration of something true, Nietzsche writes, is necessarily false because there is simply no true world. He argued that the caustic strength of nihilism is absolute, and under its withering scrutiny, the highest values devalue themselves. The aim is lacking, and why finds no answer. Inevitably, nihilism will expose all cherished beliefs and truths as symptoms of a defective Western mythos. Nietzsche argued for the belief of nihilism, but he also argued against nihilism as well. He believed that a nihilistic root of the collapse of meaning, relevance, and purpose would in turn be the most destructive force in history, constituting a total assault on reality and nothing less than the greatest crisis that humanity could face. We can make examples of some of the most destructive civilizations in human history, and find this is true once certain systems in society, to name a few, the financial, religious, and cultural beliefs, are dilapidated. We see catastrophic situations arise, and nothingness edging itself into life. If nothing matters, who are we to call some of the worst humans to ever step foot on Earth objectively bad for trying to wipe out entire cultures, such as Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, and Heinrich Himmler, just to name a few? I would hope that we all understand why the things these men strived for are fundamentally horrifying. But the dangers arise when we are not able to explain why it is logically terrible, so we are unable to convince every person of such evil paths that they should not follow. Friedrich Nietzsche still to this day sees much blame for the era of Nazism. Even though he was able to foresee the true consequences of these dangers, he still continued in his writings and preachings of nihilism. He believed that as a species, if we could move through the destructive collapse of civilization that nihilism would sooner or later cause, we would be able to rebuild new courses of action for mankind, to eventually move forward as a species, and advanced morality without any prejudice of past existence. Because ultimately, the transformation from the humble earthbound caterpillar to the winged beauty with the gift of flight, the butterfly, speaks to our own capacity to move through different life cycles, mirroring our own journeys of regeneration, renewal, expansion, and rebirth. Knocking down a building and replacing it with bigger, better, more modern approach will not make the tenants homeless, but arise the opportunity for a better home. Take a minute to think about your own life, specifically the steadfast emergence of social media, the decrease in religion that holds people morally accountable for their actions, the destruction of old beliefs and practices, which in turn are made into newer, more modern approaches. Can you see any similarities arising? Because as long as humanity moves forward, the inability to help others understand why something is wrong will slowly deplete, because what makes them wrong? And so, if life truly has no meaning or purpose, surely our response should be to at least make the best of a bad situation. Personally, I find comfort in living a life as stoically as I can. At the end of the day, can't being alive be enough reason for living? We, as humans, will always try to find reasons for doing certain things. We should strive to live the best life that we can, according to what circumstances we are under or born with.